fix a bug where the health of the train would not correctly switch when the player would use Shield the Knight to make it shield. So the text wouldn't update, the color of the train wouldn't update. One of my tasks was to add animations to the charge bar so that when the player picks up a dead body, how much of the charge bar the player has access to increases. I also wanted to add a little animation so that this makes it very clear and then had all the logic to it. One of my bugs was to fix the volume slider before the volume slider would update its text and position. However, the logic for it actually updating throughout the games was not correctly being set and called. One of my tasks was to add more feedback to the tooltip. Players found that it moving from the side and inwards was too confusing, so instead we have it fading in and out on the middle of the screen, and then we also have a sound effect that now plays when the tooltip pops up. One of my tasks was to increase the effectiveness of the furnace's HUD. So now they show all the resources that the player can use. So it's constantly tracking what resources the player uses and updates when resources are spent. One of my tasks was for balancing the charge. So I have all the information on what I did. I had multiple different play tests, different versions that I did. So I had 3 different versions of the game for the charge, where I had 4 players play through each version, and I counted track of how many times the players dies to charge. This is the values I changed, and then my hypothesis, and then these are all just balancing. Version 1 number of deaths of players to charge. So everyone who played the first version of the game died at least once while playing the game to charge. In version 2, 2 people successfully beat the game without dying at all. 1 person died once, and 1 person died 3 times. And for the third version, only 1 person did not die, while 1 person died 2 times, and then the other 2 died at least once. One of my tasks was to balance resources in the areas and buildables. So I had 3 different versions of the game with 4 people play testing each versions. What I measured was what buildables were built and which part of the levels were these items built at. We had 1 persistent level and then 4 sections of that level. So we have the original values, and then I lowered the values as players were still struggling in the second version, and then in the third version I lowered the values even more, which most players did much better when lowering the values. For version 1 of the resources, no player was able to beat the game. The resources were extremely unbalanced. Every player was only able to build the furnace at level 1, or I should say in level 1, the first section. So by decreasing drastically the resources, every player was able to build the furnace within the first section. All players built the repair station. Most did in the second section, 1 did in the fourth. All players were able to build a charging station. Half the players were able to build the resource collection, and they did in the fourth stage. Half the players built the upgraded furnace in the first stage, 1 did in the third, and then the charging station, 2 players built it, both in the later end of the game. So now we have the third version, where we have the furnace being built again by all the players in the first stage. The repair station is built by all players. The charging station is built by all players. The resource collection is built by 3 out of the 4 players. The upgraded furnace is built by all 4 players in the second and third level, and then the charging station is built by 3 out of the 4 players. so much more of the resources are being built throughout the game.
So in total, I have 25 tasks.
Hello, my name is Henry Chen, and here I am today to present you with my tasks for this sprint. And as you can see here, with my filter, I have 3 in QA fail and 25 of them in done. So I will get to reasons of why exactly I failed 3 tasks, but I'll be going from downwards just to start with. So to begin with, my first issue was a bug task where the charge shot would deal damage to targets outside of its range, where basically the step to recreate this would be going towards an enemy group cluster, fire my charge shot, and somehow it would deal damage to enemies that were outside of its range. Next, it would be the charge shot dealing damage to, or dealing no damage to barricades / buffer stoppers. So I could go to a level, find a buffer stopper, shoot it with a charge shot. It would take no damage from the charge shot. And as a player, I wanted to be able to switch between weapons. So basically, I wanted to input a certain button and switch between weapons, which is the laser and the charge shot. Next, I wanted a audio cue to indicate what the charge shot is doing in the game. So basically, whenever it is being charged, I want to hear it charging. And if I wanted it to explode, or when it exploded, I wanted the player to be able to hear that, hey, the charge shot has exploded or / detonated. Next, I wanted a visual representation of the charge shot. And basically, similar to the audio cue, I wanted a visual effect to show what exactly the charge shot was doing. At this point in time, the charge shot was basically a white sphere that grew bigger as it was being charged, but now it has visuals to it in addition. I had a issue with the enemy turrets where the bullets were shooting into the air. So basically, whenever the new mesh for our turret was being implemented, the turrets would shoot straight up instead of towards the player or whatever it was targeting. The enemy turret would fail to target the player, and so this was another bug where whenever the player entered its range, it would somehow fail to target the enemy, or the enemy turret would fail to target the player rather. I had a task for implementing additional functionality. So basically, I wanted to be able to implement things I was not able to include in the last previous sprints. So it's basically a carryover task of sorts. And so for this, I wanted the turret to be able to display a visual cue whenever it was being damaged, and also for it to drop loot whenever it was defeated to reward the player for their efforts. As you can see here, once again, for whenever the turret is being damaged, and once again for whenever the turret is being defeated and rewards the player. My next task was another bug. This one was the enemy failed to get the closest target. So basically, the mobile enemies that are boots on the ground, the ones that aren't turrets, they would fail to get the closest target to what they were actually targeting. So basically, it would just kind of stand in place. And so the next issue was that the enemy doesn't move in the level after being placed by a spawner. When it spits out an enemy, the enemy would just kind of stand in place. This was after failing to get it closest was solved. It was 2 different issues. And so I wanted to also give additional enemy functionality. So in this one, I haven't been able to, it's kind of a carryover task from previous sprints that I haven't been able to implement. And so for this sprint, I wanted to be able to include a way for visual cues and audio cues to be implemented whenever the enemy is being damaged. I wanted the enemy to be automatically placed into the world at certain locations. I also wanted to create additional enemy variations, and I also wanted for enemies to drop rewards whenever they're defeated. So just to begin with, whenever the player has damaged an enemy, I wanted the player to be able to hear that they have physically damaged an enemy via their weapon. I also wanted to do it via visuals, so basically they would glow red whenever they were hurt, then go back to the textures. As a designer, I wanted to implement variations to challenge the player. This was basically having various enemies to deal with instead of just one base enemy, so stuff that can explode, some stuff that are faster than the others, some enemies that are just more tanky and more damage dealing. I wanted to implement various enemy elements to engage the player in different scenarios. Next, as a player, I wanted to spawn enemies into various regions of the map. So basically, I wanted a spawner. So if you cross a certain checkpoint, enemies would spawn essentially. And for this was done via placing spawners near little broken tracks. As a player, I also wanted to be rewarded for whenever I defeated an enemy, and that was via dropping loot like scrap and such. As a player, I also wanted a visual cue for whenever the barricade was also being damaged. This was something that I had to add later on. So basically, it would function the same as the enemy being damaged. It would glow red whenever it's hurt, and then go back to its normal texture. And then, as a designer, I wanted it to spawn different types of enemies in an area. So basically, I wanted to spawn a variety of enemies, like an array of enemies, a list of enemies, and then just randomly pick and choose which one to spawn. Next, I wanted to add additional laser functionality. So basically, this was just a carryover, or rather, information I've gotten via playtest, and that's wanted to implement. So first, as a player, I wanted to be able to fix train tracks with a laser. So whenever you hit the train tracks with a laser, you would be able to heal or fix it. Next, as a player, I wanted to shoot the laser further, so basically increase the range of the weapon. And next, I wanted to get the laser beam end only to show whenever it hit something. I only wanted certain visual effects to show whenever it actually made contact with something. Finally, the tracks were also still glowing whenever they're being fixed. So in this case, this bug was a very minor one, but whenever the train track or a broken track was fixed, it would still somehow glow green just to show that was being healed, even though it was already fixed. In terms of what I failed to fully implement additional charge shot functionality, or rather, not fully failed it, but I partially failed it, so nonetheless, it's a failure. Basically, I failed to introduce onboarding information to the player, so I couldn't, due to time restraints, I wasn't able to get to introducing what the player could do with the charge shot, how they could be introduced to it. I never really had the chance to actually fully implement that within the game, as other things had taken my attention. As a designer, I wanted to limit the use of charge shots to be avoided being spammed by the player. So essentially, I wanted a little gate for the player to not spam the charge shot, and I failed this because I had collected the data. As such, I failed this task. So once again, I would like to reiterate, out of my 28 self-assigned tasks, I had 25 completed, 3 failed. And thank you very much for seeing my sprint overview rather, and I hope you have a nice day. I'll hand it off to the next person.
Mohan here from Bad Wolf. So as part of my tasks, one of my tasks include creating a more defined tutorial level. This involved converting the initial MVP level into a proper tutorial level, so that players would be informed of the controls and of the situation in once the tutorial level is done. Part of this tasks involved creating audio and visual feedback for players. This meant recording and creating my own audio hints so that the players can actually see, or rather hear, all the relevant details regarding that. And also creating images of the tutorials for those moments when they need to see the right tutorial itself based off of the audio hint. As part of this task, I also needed to add in or replace the blueprints that were there in this level from the previous sprints and make it more relevant and make it more up to date. Another one of the tasks I had put for myself was adding controller inputs as well for the player. While it was easy to add in the controller inputs, I had to remove this from the game entirely, mostly because during the tutorial level, I ran into an issue where I was unable to figure out when a player had a controller connected to their system. As a result of this, despite being able to show the controls and even put in the controller input to control the character for interaction with the world, I had to remove it because I was not able to show it in the tutorial level as well. Another thing I was tasked with was redoing the credits page. In up until the previous sprints, because it was just us designers working on it, I could easily add in people. However, as the number of people started to grow, I had to create a new credits page for me to be able to add in those people. And on top of that, our roles within the design of the game, within the design process of the game, expanded. I had to create more space so that we could see what we had done. So as a result, I had to redesign the entire credits page of the game to show both the designers and the artists who have done work on the project. Apart from the previous tasks, I had also tasked myself in this sprint to create another version of the main level. This was because up until end of the previous sprint, we had the train moving continuously from the start of the main level to the end of the main level. I had felt initially that maybe it was a little too fast or a little too fast paced for certain players. I decided to get a unit playtest on that, where in the duplicated version of the main level, the train would stop at the beginning of each section. That is, once it has crossed the bridge, it would stop once it has crossed the bridge and allow the players a little bit more rest time. Unfortunately, I do not have any visible data for this, but tests show that players didn't really care for it stopping. In fact, they preferred it if it was continuously moving. Apart from tasks, I was also responsible for some bugs that came up as a result of some of the systems I built in the previous sprints. One of them was a buildable bug, wherein when the player presses the build key to show the buildables on the train, they don't get to see the available buildables on the newly fixed cards. This happens while the builds are showing. So, for example, if you have cart 1 is fixed but cart 2 is not, and you're showing the buildables on cart 1, cart 2, once you fix it, by default it should, by way of logic, it should show all the buildables on, since you're able to see the buildables on cart 1. However, the way I built the system at that time, it did not allow for that. Every time you toggle build, cart 1 would either show or hide, and depending on whether cart 1 was showing or hiding, if that is once you had fixed it while cart 1's buildables were showing, you would have cart 2's buildables hide or show, not show or hide, like how it is for cart 1. So to counteract that, what I had done was I created a buildables manager for the train that continuously shows whether you can build any buildables on the cards of the train. Additionally, I also created option for the player to be able to toggle whether they can see the build or not, and you can see that in the options menu itself. When you go in, you'll see a toggle build. This allows the player to be able to toggle the build, press B to toggle or view what they can build and what they can't build. Another bug that was there as a result of one of my systems that I'd built in from previous sprints was the interaction text bug. So at times there'd be garbled text, or the previously interacted objects interaction text would display for objects that did not have any interaction text. One thing I had to do was to remove all the garbled text. I just had to make sure that there weren't any other texts coming in. That was another build I had to fix.
Hi, I'm Carlos Hamilton. I'm a member of Batwolf, and I will be going over my JIRA task. My first JIRA task was Sky Zone creation. The description for this was, this will be when I change the color of the sky zone, making it go from like a blue sky to an orange apocalyptic sky. I did this in both the tutorial level and the main level. Now I will be showing my second JIRA task. This is level farm scaling. I was just expanding the farm level, adding new landscape to make it look and give the player a better experience. My next JIRA task was level voiding for the farm level. At the end of the farm level, it's just before the transitioning of the desert level, there's a trench leading from the original level, the farm level, to the desert level. I plan on filling in the large gap, making it look smoother, adding landscape, and overall just making it fit well together. So my next JIRA task after this is the transitioning from the farm level start to the desert area. The trench doesn't kill the player instantly. This was my first bug. To fix this bug, start the game, locate the trench, keep moving the height of the ground and testing until the player dies before hitting the ground. After you find the right height, submit changes and save. After that, test one more time to see if you fixed the bug. And that's how I completed the bug. My next bug was Z-flighting in the farm end to desert begin transition. My description for this was, when starting the farm level, at the end you see the start of the desert color shift from green to brown. Then as you go in, before seeing the turns in the desert level, there's a huge amount of Z-flighting in the level. To fix this, start up the game, locate transitioning between farm level end and desert level start. Once you do this, move and readjust the scaling and the shape of the objects that are mixing together. After that, save changes. The next thing for my JIRA task is level voiding for the desert level. And this description says that in the desert level, before entering the forest, there's a transition area. I plan to adjust the colors and the height of the space to blend the orange tones of the forest with the yellowish hues of the desert. I'll do this by raising the terrain and adding more detail from the start of the transition to the end. Now, my next JIRA task is the dead body in the desert level. This was a bug. How to fix the bug? To fix it, you're basically raising it up, locating it, and once you have it, save, and you're all good. So now we'll move on to my next tier task, level voiding for forest level end. This is my description for this task. Between the mountain level and the end of the forest level, there's currently a tunnel with a plain wall separating the two. I plan on removing the wall and making a mountain blend more naturally with the forest. Instead of creating a blocky setup, I'll aim to create more of a seamless transition by designing blocks that better represent the mountain merging into the forest level. My next year task is the level expansion for forest. Begin. I plan to increase the size of the forest level by creating an additional landscape that extends the environment further. This expansion will be and add more depth and distance to the level, making the forest feel larger and more immersed as the players progress through it. My next year task is level refinement for the forest level. I'm going to enhance the forest level by focus on its more environmental design and interactive elements. This involves rerouting the layout to create more integrating natural obstacles and adding new visual details that reflect the dense, mysterious atmosphere of the forest. My next year task after this is opening in landscape between the mountain level and forest level. This is a bug. How I fixed the bug: I started up the game, I located the transitioning between the forest level and the mountain level start. I used landscape to pull down, filling the hole up so that players were unaware, and I added more details to fix it up. After that, I saved my changes. Now I will be getting into my next task. This is also a bug. In transitioning between forest level cave entrance and mountain level train exit, there is a heavy space glitching between the two, so Z-flighting. What I did was I started up the game, located transitioning between forest tunnel start, extended and created something that takes the player's sight from that current location, lowered it down. I did this on both sides of the tunnel transitioning and the mountain level transitioning, and then I saved my changes. My next bug was Z-flighting in mountain area after bridge transition before cave entrance. To fix this, start up the game, locate the bridge in the mountain level, move slightly forward and select the floor in the mountain level. Delete the floor and see if that's where the Z-flighting is coming from. If not, keep deleting the floors to find out which one it is, or locate the one that's glitching in between the two and save your changes after you test. My next gear task was level landscape for mountain level begin. I plan on making the mountain level bigger by adding more landscape and extending the distance the players can travel through. This makes it feel more expansive and immersive. My next year task is level refinement of the mountain level. I'm going to improve the mountain level by focusing on its environment and interactive features. This means redesigning, introducing more visual details from highlights to the mysterious mountain level's atmosphere. By refining these aspects, I will make the level feel more immersive and engaging, ensuring that every part of the mountain adds to the overall player experience. These are all my JIRA tasks. I completed 15 out of 17.